This is Edge of the Box, a podcast brought to you by WhoScored.com.
Euro 2020 has been 12 months in the making, even longer if you consider qualification, but we're finally here. We're about a week out from the opening game, and I, for one, cannot wait for it to get started. Who wrote this script? I'm joined once again by my hero, Jonathan Wilson, and WhoScored's very own Martin Laurence to preview and follow Euro 2020 every step of the way with the Edge of the Box podcast, proudly sponsored by Bet Victor. In this show, we'll be delving deep into England's chances this summer, whether it will finally be the major tournament to remember or it will be one of those many, many disappointments that we've all experienced before. We'll also be doing our Euro 2020 predictions as well, so plenty to come in this show. But to kick things off, let's look straight forward to England's opener with Croatia on June the 13th. It's been in everyone's calendar for ages now. I've been chopping and changing how I think England will line up, and to be fair, Gareth Southgate probably has as well. Jonathan, how much are you looking forward to that opener?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think England, I think this is the best England squad possibly of my lifetime. However, I think they've got an incredibly difficult draw. So I don't think there's all three group opponents are tricky, and then if England do get through, if they come top of the group, they're playing second in that group of Germany, Portugal, France, and Hungary. So that's a hugely difficult game. And if they finish second, okay, it's potentially a slightly easier second round game against Sweden or Poland, probably, but then France in the quarterfinals. So England are doomed. They've got no chance of winning it. And that's why I think you often hear before tournaments kind of what would represent success for England, semi-final, final. It's about how well they play. And if they play, I'd much rather they play well and lose narrowly to Portugal in the second round than scrape their way through to a quarter-final and lose to France. So.
Yeah, I mean, I find it better to go into the tournaments with a negative attitude, to be honest, because in the World Cup in 2018, Villa had just lost the playoff final. I was very down about football in general, so I went in just expecting more misery and woe. So I think going into a tournament, Martin, with a negative attitude can sometimes be helpful with England.
Well, let's hope so from Jonathan's account.
Yeah. He said he was positive. He said he was positive at the start.
Yeah.
He was positive at the start, and then he got more and more negative as he carried on talking.
Yeah, I'm not quite that negative, although I completely take his points on board about the draw. It is tricky. When people saw the group, they probably thought England should be quite comfortable, but I agree it's not an easy group at all. And yeah, it's interesting to see. Obviously, they're not going to play for second, but I do think that topping the group isn't all important, basically, this time around.
Well, there's almost an argument coming third might get them the easiest passage to the last four.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's a big gamble to take.
Playing for third, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like all these extra permutations of teams finishing third and stuff like that. I liked it when it was simple and I knew what was going on. You finish first or second, you go into the quarterfinals, but the rule makers have made their changes and it is the way it is.
Jonathan, of course, when you try and map out a tournament, you always assume that every other team, apart from England, play exactly to form, which they won't. Something weird will happen somewhere. So, yeah, who knows?
Yeah, it's certainly a difficult one to map out. Now, Jonathan, there's plenty going on with the England team with regards to fitness. I guess the big news a few days before we've come on and done this podcast. I mean, Trent has been a saga for the last month or so, it's felt. And then he gets himself in. Everyone's looking forward to watching him play. And then, of course, he gets injured in the friendly and we won't see him in the tournament at all now. Can you just talk us through that and the right-back situation in general?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of understood Southgate, and I understand Southgate's hesitation over him. The previous two seasons before the one just gone, so 18, 19 and 19, 20, Alexander-Arnold was absolutely sensational for Liverpool. 25 assists across those two seasons. And then this season has been, I don't think he's played particularly badly, and certainly as the season went on, I think he got better and better. But I think he does pose a risk in a team that is not as well drilled as Liverpool were those two previous seasons. And so I think that first leg of that Real Madrid game is the great example of that. That because Liverpool weren't pressing as well as they have done, Toni Kroos had time on the ball to measure those passes in behind Alexander-Arnold, which brings those two goals in the first half of that first leg. Now, that's nothing to do with Alexander-Arnold, really. We know he plays high up the pitch, And that's part of his game and part of what he's great at, because he's such a good deliverer of the ball. You want him playing high up the pitch. But if you have that spacing behind him, you've got to work out a way of countering that. Now, you could counter that by playing a third centre-back who covers behind him, or you could do what Liverpool did and press. And press well and not give any opponent any time on the ball to measure those passes. Now, I just don't think it's possible for an international team to press that well. They don't have the time together, the day after day after day, month after month after month. You don't have that. Even going into a tournament, Southgate has a week with his full squad because 10 of the players have been away playing in European finals. So international football is necessarily less sophisticated than club football. And so I think where Alexander-Arnold might have been useful to England was as a wing-back. And that's a question, because obviously he doesn't do that for Liverpool. Or if England were chasing the game with 20, 25 minutes to go, then it doesn't really matter for spacing behind him. You're happy to take that risk of his attacking quality. So you could put him on for, say, Kyle Walker. So bearing all that in mind, I could see complete sense in taking him as a third right-back. I don't really understand the point of taking 3 more defensive right-backs, while acknowledging that Trippier could play on the left and that either Walker or James could play on the right side of 3. So personally, I would have left out one of the other 3 and had him as the third as that option. But he's gone now, so fine. It is what it is. And I he's a really, really good footballer. If England had to lose somebody, he's not the worst person to lose. To lose your 4th choice right-back, there are worse things in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Martin, at this point, we don't actually know who's coming in to replace Trent, but there's kind of fitness worries all over the park, really, especially the long-term absentees of Harry Maguire and Jordan Henderson, who hasn't played since February. What do you make of all that?
It's not ideal, is it?
No.
I think in terms of a replacement, it's difficult. There are pros and cons for all of them. I think you're looking between Ward-Prowse, Lingard and Watkins, aren't you? I see a lot of people saying Ward-Prowse because they think, you should definitely have a sort of expert set piece taker, and we've lost Trent as well, who is one of those. To take him, he's certainly an asset, but he's never going to start. So I don't get it. You're not going to bring a player on to take a free kick or a corner, maybe a penalty and a shootout. But
we've got Trippier as well, who took all the set pieces in the last World Cup. So
they've got perfectly good set piece takers, as long as it's not Harry Kane, other than penalties. I don't really see that. People saying, Grealish gets so many free kicks, Ward-Prowse so good at free kicks. Are they both going to play in the same lineup? I don't see it. So I don't really see the point in that. Lingard, I think, obviously had an excellent end of the season, but we've got plenty of options relatively similar, if not better than him. I think the one I would take, and I wouldn't want it to seem biased, but I would probably take Watkins, just because I think if England lack something up front, it's someone who can run the channels, and he's better than that. He's better at that than both Kane and Calvert-Lewin as sort of an out ball at the end of the game. If we're holding on to something or something like that, I think I'd take him just to have a striker option, because Greenwood's injury as well. I just think his work rate and that sort of willing running from the front, again, probably wouldn't play. Let's face it, this is the 26th player in the squad. They're probably not even going to get in the matchday squads. You can still only have 23 players in the matchday squad. But just in terms of something a bit different, I would probably go for Watkins personally.
I think I would. I completely see that logic, and this is not something I would passionately disagree with you over. I think I would have Ward-Prowse, not for the dead ball thing, but just because if Henderson's injured, and the fact he was forced to pull out of the Austria game, and we're not sure at this stage whether he's going to play against Romania or play any part even against Romania. He is one of those sort of general purpose midfielders, and actually the only other one England have in the squad after Henderson is Bellingham, and for all his immense quality, he is about 3 years old, and that is a concern. So purely as cover for him, I think I would go Ward-Prowse, but I also see that Greenwood gave you something that England now don't have, and Watkins is probably the nearest thing to replicating that. So I can see that argument as well.
Yeah, there's kind of doubts, Jonathan, over a couple of players as well. Phillips has got a niggling injury. Rashford's been nursing an injury for a while. Grealish is not at peak fitness yet because he's had a long-term injury. England's record with injuries going into tournaments over the years hasn't been great. We've took gambles before and they haven't paid off. Why do we just always seem to have this history? Yeah,
I mean, I think it's slightly different this time around, but it does seem to be a perennial England problem that, first World Cup, I remember 82 when they took Keegan and Brooking and they ended up coming off the bench for the very last game, for the 5th game that England played in that tournament. I think it's maybe partly to do with the English love of sort of a Roy Rovers mentality. We have our great hero who we believe will come on and save us in a time of need. And Roy Rovers he's just a footballing version of King Arthur. This is written in the DNA of the country. I think it's a little bit different here because of a 26-man squad that maybe you can afford to take more of a risk. And I also think that, as we just said, I don't really think there's that many like-for-like replacements for Henderson. I think Henderson is a hugely useful player off pitch in the squad. I think he's we've seen with various things during the pandemic in terms of speaking up for footballers' rights. He's sort of a shop steward. I think he's a very sort of useful leader. So I do see some logic there. And Maguire, the problem is if Maguire's not there, I don't really see I think play a back four. And so if you want to play a back four, you probably do need Maguire. So again, normally I would say don't bother taking people who can't play in every game or who couldn't play at least some part of the first game. Taking Bruyne to the Euros in 2012 when he was suspended for the first two games seemed to me just a waste. But here I do understand it. And I think it's not just England this time. I think the nature of the season, the fact that you've had, it was 6 weeks shorter than normal. I think that has put a lot of pressure on a lot of squads, and there are actually a lot of players who are either out or carrying knocks.
Yeah, Belgium and De Bruyne springs to mind.
Well, Belgium have got a lot of problems, but not just De Bruyne, but Witsel is missing. Hazard has barely played, so they've got problems more generally as well.
Yeah, as you say, it's quite a unique tournament, isn't it, for all kinds of reasons?
Well, I fear it's going to be a bit like the World Cup in 2002. That tournament started in May. That first game when Senegal beat France was May the 31st because it was played 2 weeks earlier because of the Japanese rainy season, and the result was everybody was knackered, and so you had all these shocks early on, which was great, but it meant that by the quarterfinals there was one good team left in the tournament, and guess what? They won it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair point. We're talking about systems a little bit there, Martin, and I know you're not an advocate for three at the back because we've chatted before we came on. I kind of agree with Jonathan. I think you have to play three at the back with England's centre-half options. It was Cody and Mings who played centre-half in the friendly against Austria. It's likely that one of them is probably actually going to start for England in this group stage.
Yeah. My argument would be, why are we worried about that? Why are we treating Cody and Mings like they're these duds, like they haven't seen a ball before? I think if it was the other way round and Maguire got injured for the latter stages, I'd understand it. And I said before that the teams in the group are competitive, but without wanting to sound like this sort of big I am England fan, we're better than the rest. We are better than the rest in this group.
It's dangerous territory. It's really dangerous territory, Martin.
I'm sticking by it. Like Mings and Cody, they look comfortable enough. They both won't play together, but they look comfortable enough against a pretty average Austria team. But that Austria team are probably on a level with Czech Republic and Scotland, similar sort of caliber. If you think about just Tyrone Mings, for example, who I think would be my sort of one to partner Stones, just because he plays in a back four for his club and he's left-footed, there's that balance there. Would Tyrone Mings get in the Croatia squad? Yes, he would. Would he get in the Czech Republic lineup? Yes, he would. Would he get in the Scotland lineup? Yes, he would. Are the strikers that he's playing anything above a level that he's used to in the Premier League? No, they're not. Andre Kramaric is very good striker. Patrick Schick's a good striker. Che Adams is a good striker, but they're not world beaters. I'm not saying that he'll be absolutely fine. There might be some hairy moments, but particularly in a tournament where, as I mentioned before, we don't really need to worry too much about topping this group, in my opinion. If we lose one game in the group, it will be seen as a disaster, but it's really, really not. I don't see Harry Maguire starting the first game, certainly, and I probably don't see him starting the second game. And then it's a case of, does he play the third game? It's only if we need to win it. You probably play him for 45, 60 minutes if we're already through. I don't see it personally. I did have another point to make, but I can't remember what it was.
We're back.
I just think a back four. I just think a back four is fine, and I don't like the idea that we're going to change system when Maguire comes back. It just disrupts things. Just have faith in your players. They're not that bad. They're really not that bad. Have faith. Don't change the system. Work on it from the start of the tournament to the finish, and back yourself.
Well, if I can offer a counter argument,
yeah,
I was really worried and remain deeply worried by England going back to back four for the World Cup qualifiers in March. If you look at when they played the back four, letting in 3 against Kosovo, losing away in Prague, the game against the Netherlands in the Nations League, they were really open, and you don't win tournaments being open. Look at every successful team in international football over the last 10 years, and they're all really boring. Boring is good. Even Spain were a slightly more boring version of Barcelona. And you look at that team that won the World Cup for Spain, one player who didn't play for Real Madrid or Barcelona. It was only Capdevila who didn't play for. So if you're all at 2 clubs, you have some of that cohesion. When your side is based around players from one squad who know each other. England don't have that. Look at France at the World Cup. Great players playing in a straitjacket. Algeria at the Cup of Nations. Brazil at the Copa America. The structure being dull is what wins. Even Germany in 2014, because of Brazil's self-destruction, their hysteria in the semi-final, people have got in their heads that Germany was a great attacking team. It wasn't. They tried to be attacking in the group stage, and they were terrible, and they should have been beaten by Ghana. And if Jordan Ayew had half a brain, they would have been. They struggled against Algeria in the last 16, and then Jogi Löw goes on that famous run along the beach in Rio and comes back and thinks, yeah, go boring, stick Miroslav Klose up front. And they win two of the next 3 games 1-0. And then the other one, Brazil ripped their own heart out and spread it on toast for them. Counter-attacking works. England have to be more boring. And so I'd be more than happy with a back 3 and then with Rice sitting in front and then the one alongside him. That's where I think you can alter it according to the opposition, that maybe you play Mount against a weaker team, but you bring in Phillips or you bring in Henderson if you're playing against a France or Portugal or Germany. And then you rely on your front 3 to give you the creativity.
Yeah, I mean,
it'll be rubbish to watch, but that's how you might win.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we care about.
Do you want to win, or do you want to go out having had a 3-0 win over the Czech Republic? It's
who's scoring the goals? If it's a Jack Grealish hat trick, I'll take it.
I mean, there is so many questions. I mean, I think Martin Rees-James is a nice little bonus in the last few weeks by the fact he's kind of fulfilled the dual role of he's played some games at right wing back and he's now proved as well that he can play at right centre back. But going forwards, there's so much attacking talent. People don't want England to play with that straitjacket. They want to go out and attack. And Jonathan's talking of counter-attack there. Actually, England have got a lot of good counter-attacking players that they could utilise, but it's trying to fit them all in, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I think if England do play a back 4, which I think they will if Maguire's fit or when Maguire's fit, it's a case of that front 3, isn't it, that everyone's trying to work out. And I think I completely understand the argument and agree with the argument that it can't be Grealish and Foden alongside Kane, even though I think those are probably the 2 best sort of talents. I think they're the 2, if I was going for 2 on sort of individual basis. But in terms of a system, you need pace in behind, you need that threat in behind, and they just don't really carry that. So yeah, that front 3 is going to be so difficult. I'd love to say, Jack Grealish starts, but I kind of agree with everyone that it's really difficult to leave out Phil Foden, and then it becomes who starts on the other side. If you're looking at form, Sterling or Rashford, they don't warrant it, but they're the ones that can pose that problem. I think in particular Rashford probably suits that system better. He's more of a threat in behind than Sterling, who's sort of a direct runner with the ball, stops play a little bit, whereas Rashford is more of a threat in behind. So I think Rashford might have a shot. I think Sterling's form will be a big concern to Gareth Southgate because he hasn't been great for England either of late. So it's a difficult one. And then the other one is Jadon Sancho, who on form, it should probably be Foden and Sancho. But again, doesn't really get in behind defences. That's not really his style. So yeah, I don't know what my answer to that question is. I would probably
answered it.
I've not answered it, but I'm going to say Foden and Sancho. either side of Kane. I'm just going to go on form.
I think you're wrong.
I think you're right.
You think he's wrong? The reason I say he's wrong is because I cannot see a way in which Southgate doesn't play with two sitters. I also can't see a way in which we're not playing three at the back at the start of the tournament. I don't think Mount will play as a sitter, but I think he 100% is in the 11. So I think he takes up one of the roles behind Harry Kane. And I also can't see Southgate not playing Sterling, Jonathan.
I mean, I hope you're wrong, because if that happens, then there's no place for Foden. I know Foden has to play. Well, I don't know. I don't think he needs to play two holders. I mean, if he's playing a back three, I guess it changes things slightly. But I just think you got to look at that front three, and who do we know will be in there? Kane will be in there, clearly. Kane drops deep, therefore you need somebody who can go beyond him. Now, I take Martin's point that Sancho is not a runner in behind in the way that Rashford is, but he is quick. And he is good on the counter, and he is good at hitting space, and he's the only one there who naturally plays on the right. And he's in form. The last 6 weeks, he's been exceptional. So I would have him, and I have Foden to the left. And Foden, I would hope Mount plays, whether it's as one of two sitters in front of the back three, or whether it's as a more creative player in the midfield three. And I think that potential of Mount and Foden linking, one going beyond the other, I think that's potentially very exciting, that they could find little patterns and little combinations that could be very difficult, even for quite deep lying defences. And I think that gives England then a really nice range of options and a range of threats up front. Sterling, I feel that I've never fully been convinced by Sterling. I think he's a really good footballer who quite often makes quite bad decisions. And I think his final shot or his final choice of pass, when he's playing well, it's fine. But he doesn't have to. His form has to dip slightly before it looks really suspect and questionable. I think even after semi-final against Croatia, there were a couple of times when he got in great positions running beyond Kane, his pace against what at the time was quite a lumbering Croatian backline, and he didn't take advantage because he dithered. And that's always been my doubt about him. But I mean, and of course, one of the points we discussed, Sterling, is that he's become such a sort of cipher for a whole other range of issues that you sort of almost feel duty bound to defend him because of a lot of the attacks on him have been ridiculous. But notwithstanding that, I think he does dither at times, and I don't think he's in form at the minute. And therefore, I would go either Rashford or Sancho. Sancho, I think, is in the better form. I think Rashford looked tired towards the end of the season, and I also think he prefers to come from the left than the right.
Yes, I agree with you on Sterling. I think if he hasn't got time to finish, he's quite a good instinctive finisher. But if he has time to think about it, like you say, his finishing can be quite erratic. I mean, what I've taken away from this is, if I didn't know it already, is that whatever Gareth Southgate does, whatever team he picks, he's going to be getting stick from somewhere because there is just so many attacking options and everyone's got that one player that they want to see. This
is part of the problem with international football, that the question, it's almost like we flip the polarities from how we look at club football. Because at club football, you've got a finite number of resources, and it's how do we best use these resources that we have. Whereas international football, certainly if you're England and you've got, I don't know, the three of us could name our 26, and we could easily come up with 50 players between us, and none of them would be daft picks. There are a huge number of options. So people then start looking at the people who aren't there and looking at who's been left out. And because you don't have a 38-game league season, so there's no sort of sense of rotation, or well, if he plays 25 games, he's played a full role. There's this sort of temptation to just shoehorn in everybody. And you only have to look at Argentina's record in the last 20 years to see how badly that goes. You can't do that. You have to work out the best system. You have to work out one or two options in each position. You have to maybe then work out a couple of tweaks. So basically, you've got to try and think of it like a club team or like a club squad and say, this is my 20-man, 25-man club squad. How do I get the best out of them? And just because a player comes through who's brilliant, if he doesn't fit your system, don't try and fit him in. And you've got to, I think an international manager has to think as much as possible like a club manager of, okay, I'm short of a right back. Where can I find a good right back? Okay, here's this kid coming through. Do I promote him early? Yeah, we'll try it. But not be distracted by whoever happens to be the flavour of the month in a position where you already have players or where the system is already working.
Yeah, I think back to England in 2014 when we had Vardy, Sturridge, Rooney, Kane, Dele Alli all on the pitch. Rashford, I think, was on the pitch as well, like just trying to get all your attacking players on the pitch. And we had a terrible tournament. So, yeah, I think that's a valid point you've raised there. Martin, as our resident Who Scored man, what are they saying? what are we saying the team should be from a WhoScored perspective?
So the England lineup, based on league ratings this season, of the players in the squad, would be Sam Johnston in goal. Obviously not going to happen, but I think that's a valid case. I do think he's probably been the best performing of the three over the course of the season. But yeah, I do think Sam Johnston in goal for WhoScored, and then it's Kieran Trippier right back. I think people underestimate him, just how good, because you're not watching him play a lot of the time in Atletico. Had an excellent season, probably the best season of his career at club level. John Stones and Maguire at centre back, Luke Shaw at left back, just ahead of Ben Chilwell, which is obviously probably one of the tightest calls in the squad. And then the three in midfield we've got is Calvin Phillips, Declan Rice, and Mason Mount, which I'd agree with personally. That would be the three I'd play, and I'd play Phillips as the sitter, as he does for Leeds. I think that works, and I think Declan Rice can play that sort of box to box role. I think he's shown that he can do that. And then the front three, based on our ratings this season, is Sancho on the right, Kane in the middle, and Jack Grealish on the left.
I mean, I don't want to undermine the entire process here, but this is part of the problem, that you can't look at club form. No, clearly you can, but just because a player plays well in his club team, where he could be playing with totally different players and a totally different system, doing a different role, you can't then imagine he will necessarily do that in an international team. So that when I talk about you have to treat the international team more like a club side, I think you always need to start with what was our last game, what tweaks do we make to that? I mean, obviously it depends. Your last game was a friendly against Austria when half the team weren't available. You don't. But in terms of when was the last time we picked notionally a first choice 11, how do we tweak that rather than starting each game with a blank canvas and toss all the names on and see who you can squeeze in? But that actually, as it turns out,
you have successfully undermined the process.
Yeah, but I mean, as it turns out, by some bizarre coincidence, that comes out with what seems to me a perfectly reasonable team.
Yeah, I was going to say, for what it's worth, my team, in terms of differences for that, would obviously be Pickford in goal. I would probably go for Walker at right back. And I would go for, like I said before, I'd probably go for, pains me to say it, but I'd go for Foden over Jack Grealish in that 11, probably.
Yeah, how close was Foden to getting in the statistical 11? Because I'm surprised he's not in there.
Foden is sort of hampered by the fact that he made a lot of substitute appearances early in the season, so his rating is lower for that reason. If you go on starts alone, then Sterling makes it. Foden makes it, but he would make it on the right instead of Sancho instead of Grealish on the left.
Is that what's killing the Man City players then, the substitute appearances? Because there was no Walker obviously in there as well. That's obviously a problem with the algorithm, Martin? There's no Man City players in that side. Stones was in, wasn't it? No. Stones was in, wasn't it?
No, yeah. Walker, yeah, I can't really say why. Like I said, I think people don't understand or don't appreciate, I should say, how good Kieran Trippier was for Atletico this season. I think that's the reason. I genuinely think he was outstanding. He was probably one of their top three players, and they won the title. So obviously Kyle Walker won the title as well. But yeah, I think Trippier's a worthy sort of candidate.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound like I'm jumping off the back of what you've just said there, but Trippier would 100% be in my team. I think he's the best dead ball taker. I think he has had a good season from what I've read and the little bits that I have seen. But I just think he's a good tournament football player, Trippier, and he's got the track record from the last World Cup. I think he'd probably actually be one of the first names in the team sheet.
Fair enough. What does Jonathan think?
I and ah between the three right backs and can't really make a reasonable call. I sort of think Walker just as a man in possession, but if it turns out to be James or Trippier, then that's equally valid, and I'm prepared to trust Southgate's judgment on watching them over the next sort of week or so.
Yeah, I still just think it'll be three at the back. I can't get that out of my head that he won't play three at the back. And when I think back to the last tournament, he picked three at the back, and even against Panama we played it. So you were saying about changing depending on opposition, Martin, but in the last tournament he didn't do that.
No, yeah, but obviously since that tournament, he has, as Jonathan said, he has switched back to a back four. So I would be very, very surprised if he plays a back three with Maguire. I would be very, very surprised. It's not impossible, and he may well do it later in the tournament, but certainly earlier in the tournament, I'd be surprised by that. I don't like I said before. I don't think we need to. Another point I would say is that I don't think there's a team at the Euros this summer who has a particularly solid centre-back pairing coming into the tournament as a pair, I should say. A lot of people might look at France, probably don't appreciate that Rafa Varane has had a very, very difficult season. A lot of errors for Real Madrid, hasn't been that consistent.
And Kimpembe is rubbish. I'm sorry, but Kimpembe is not a good footballer.
I would have Luca Hernandez as one of my centre-backs in that pairing personally, and they play him at left-back. And that's another issue with France. They play two natural centre-backs at full-back, which worked out okay at the World Cup. But again, I would question that slightly. But yeah, I just don't think there's a pairing. I would even say Stones and Maguire, probably comfortably top 3 pairings at the tournament, in my opinion. On form this season, certainly.
Big shout. Big shout.
Without question.
I'm sure I agree. But
Germany definitely not. Spain are going into it with a completely new centre-back pairing in probably Pau Torres and Aymeric Laporte. You've got Portugal, who've obviously got Ruben Diaz, but partnering him will be either 37-year-old Jose Fonte or 38-year-old Pepe. So if you look at the sort of contenders, as it were, they're all struggling. We're not unique in this sort of, our centre-backs are a worry. And personally, I think if Stones and Maguire are fit, I don't think it is a worry at all.
Soyuncu and Demirel?
Yeah, no, I do think that's a shout, actually. I think that's a really good shout. They're excellent in qualifying as well. They conceded the fewest goals.
I know that it's gone slightly awry since the end of qualifying. They've had a few friendlies where they've let in 2 or 3, but...
What you'd say, they're both very young, never played tournament football, so that would be sort of an argument against them. But I do agree that they're sort of right up there.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't in the script at all, Jonathan. But I'm going to say to you, one thing about England you're excited about, and one thing that worries you.
It's a squad of extraordinary depth of young, gifted players. I think it's the youngest squad England have picked since Euro '96. I think there's very few obvious starters, which is good. I think I prefer that to having the golden generation when you had sort of 8 players set in stone, and then you sort of try to squeeze in a couple around them. So, in theory, at least 1 or 2 injuries shouldn't knock England too much. So I think the squad is great. The thing I'm concerned about, I mean, it's not one thing, is it? It's expectation for the first time in a while. It's the draw, I think, is much harder than people appreciate. I mean, I think people appreciate it's difficult beyond the group stage, but I think the group is not easy at all. And I just sort of fear that it could go one or two ways. That this sort of, as restrictions come to an end, the sort of pent-up energy of the last year, like it could become this sort of great festival of relief, of everybody sort of celebrating, being able to go outside and mix again. But that could also flip the other way and could become pretty unpleasant, pretty horrible. And when you have people booing, taking the knee, it doesn't fill me with confidence.
No, horrible to say that was the other night. Martin, same question to you.
I have to echo those thoughts, really. I think, yeah, and certainly in terms of the positives, from an individual perspective, I know I haven't picked him in my lineup, but I'm absolutely buzzing to see Jack Grealish at a major tournament. I think he will play. He won't play every game, but he will play. So I'm super excited to see him and Foden. Just so talented, like 2 just wonderful players to watch. And then in terms of concerns, the main one for me would be the fitness of too many players in the squad right now. That they're not coming into it. Even Declan Rice only came back from an injury at the end of the season. Yeah. So match fitness, sharpness would be a concern.
Yeah, that's all fair points as well. Right, it's the horrible question then. Jonathan, how far are England going to progress in this tournament?
Last 16.
Last 16. Do you want to talk us through why?
Well, I think they should get through the group. Home advantage hopefully will mean they'll get 4 points, which should be enough to go through, given the structure of the tournament. But then I wouldn't back them to beat France. I wouldn't back them to beat Portugal. Maybe against Germany, but I'm now slightly concerned that Germany, by bringing back Müller and Hummels, they're going to be a little bit better than they have been over the last 3 years. I mean, part of me quite wants. I almost think playing Germany in the second round is the best case scenario for England, just because I think this is a weaker Germany than we've seen for a while. Well, I mean, I know they were pretty poor at the last World Cup, but it's not a strong Germany. And to play them at Wembley, and if England beat them and beat them well, that would be such a lancing of a boil that's sort of been there for a long, long time. That could be a genuinely great moment. But, England haven't beaten a team that's won the Euros or the World Cup at a major championship since putting Spain out on penalties in '96 in a knockout game.
Not too long ago, that was really. '96 was a great year. The last time Villa won anything, and the last time England did that.
Do you know when the last time England beat a country who had won a World Cup at the time in a knockout game was in a major tournament?
No, I'm hoping you do.
1400s.
It was West Germany in 1966.
Was it?
And even that, they needed extra time and a goal that didn't cross the line.
Can I change my prediction of where I think? We'll come to you though first, Martin. What's your prediction?
I think I'm more optimistic. I think we can. Well, I think we can go all the way. I don't think we will. We've definitely got the potential to, but I'm going to go for semi-final exit again. Unfortunately,
standard.
Yeah, just hedging my bets. Go.
So, see, behind you, I can see something covering the window in your sort of your sloping roof ceiling thing. Is that a St. George flag?
No, it's not. That's a Velux blind. Other blinds are available. So. Yeah.
But it will be the flag next week. It will be the flag when the tournament starts. Oh God, let's go through them on then. I mapped it out the other night, and I ambitiously said that we'd be losing finalists. I had us finishing top of the group and hoping we might play a lumbering Germany and get through that. And I think if we get through that, like Jonathan said, is not a bad passage, and that the momentum would be with us and people coming back to fitness. So I mapped us to the final. I should say that I also played it in Football Manager, had a go at the Euros, and I got England to the final. But he was playing all different teams, so that's completely irrelevant. I lost in the final in the last minute of extra time.
Against?
I can't even remember who it was. I got a feeling it was Germany, so that probably wouldn't happen, would it? Unless they top their group. So, yeah.
For what it's worth, Jonathan's tip of England to go out in the last 16 has been boosted to 2-1 by BetVictor. And Dan's tip has been boosted to 15-2 for beaten finalists. So if you want to back yourself, there's the options there. BetVictor have boosted both of those for us. So, yeah.
You see, the thing is, even if they come second in the group, which would mean they wouldn't be playing at Wembley, I think it would be in Copenhagen. England's record against Sweden. They went 40-odd years without beating them until they beat them under Capello. I just wouldn't, and I know England beat them at the last World Cup, but I just sort of think solid Scandinavian 4-4-2 when everybody's overexcited, it's not the thing you want to face.
I'm feeling quite powerful, the fact that we're making these predictions and then prices are getting boosted based on what we're saying. I don't think that's ever happened to me before. People don't want to look at my betting accounts, so I've made some horrendous shouts over the years.
Treating that as if it's basically the head against the heart. So Jonathan's very much the head in that situation.
Sounds about right, to be honest. Well, yeah, we are associated and sponsored with BetVictor for this tournament. So before we move on for England, there's a chance to win a £25 free bet for 2 lucky listeners of Edge of the Box podcast as we assess the odds and the big movers from BetVictor. Pleased to say that I'm now joined by BetVictor's Sam Boswell to look through all the prices in the outright markets ahead of the tournament. Sam, how are you?
I'm really good, Dan. Great to be here. Looking forward to being in and out across the series, and trying to give people a bit of a clue of what's going on with the markets.
Yeah, I mean, are you looking forward to the Euros? I imagine, obviously, you are.
I am. Me and some chums have had tickets. We tend to try and make a go of getting to the Euros or a World Cup every so often. This year, we've not been too successful, but it's understandable with everything that's going on. So I'll probably be watching from home, but it means we can enjoy the action from the sofa.
Exactly. And I mean, let's hear about these free bets because that's what everyone will be listening to this for. Let's hear what's going on there.
We have got 2 £25 bets that we're going to give away, and it's a really easy way of entering. All we need you to do is to answer the following question in the YouTube comments below. It's as simple as that. Terms and conditions do apply, and as ever, we'd always urge you to gamble responsibly. Here's the question we need the answer from you guys in the comments below. Which player in the England 26-man squad has the most caps for his country without having scored? Which player in England's 26-man squad has the most caps for his country without having scored? Goalkeepers don't apply for the sake of this question. Make sure that you guys keep your eyes peeled. WhoScored will reply to 2 lucky winners in the comments. So make sure you've got your notifications on in case you're picked. Best of luck if you're entering. And if you do win, best of luck. Hopefully we can give you some pointers as to where those bets should be going.
Who are we looking for as the front runners then, Sam, for the tournament?
Right. So, I mean, tournament-wise, it's always a popular bet, isn't it? Trying to find the outright winner. There's a lot of runners and riders in there. At the moment, you'll find that England and France pretty much are tying for favouritism at the head of the market. There's obviously always a bit of patriotic money that comes for England. We're a UK-based bookmaker. We're going to see a lot of that. I would just give a shout to Scotland as well, because we've had plenty of punters that got stuck into them at around 200 to 1. But if we're looking a little bit more on what people are opting for in terms of form, Portugal, pretty popular around 8 to 1. And France would probably be pretty much the worst result outside of England. And there's a team that have been back that I actually haven't seen much chat around, which surprised me. But Germany at 8 to 1 as well for us would be a losing result. So we'll be keen to see the Germans not do their traditional effort and get too far through the tournament. But it's an interesting spread of money at the moment. I've got to say, I think the French should personally, in my book, be clear favourites. I think England have got a great team, but it would just concern me slightly with regards to tournament quality, and I think the French have definitely proven they've got that on the big stage in recent years.
Yeah, Germany got a difficult group to get out of as well, so that's something to bear in mind. And what about the player-based bets? What's going on there?
Yeah, so traditionally we all have a stab at the Golden Boot, don't we? And in Euros gone by and the World Cups, if you look back through the form book, plenty of big prices do tend to sneak into the frame. You can get 66 to 1 or 100 to 1 shots. So each way terms are something well worth considering. We're paying 4 places there, so do check that out. In terms of who we've got as the market leader at the moment, top goal scorer, we've got a tie between Romelu Lukaku at 6 to 1, Harry Kane at 6 to 1. Kane obviously has got his proven goal scoring quality. You think he's Golden Boot winner of the Premier League enough times. Also, obviously, a World Cup Golden Boot winner as well. But Lukaku coming off the back of the seasons he's had, I think a lot of people are looking at Belgium's group thinking he can clock up a few goals early doors, which is a logical thing to suggest. But if we go a little bit further down the betting, you've got the likes of Mbappe at 8 to 1, 12 to 1 Cristiano Ronaldo. Memphis Depay, who I must say, he's starting to catch my eye a little bit. He's 12 to 1. The mover as such was Karim Benzema. When there was speculation he could be recalled, he was in the betting at around 50 to 1. Now as short as 16s for France. I think he did miss a penalty, didn't he, the other night?
Yeah, he did in midweek, yeah.
So if you were backing him before that, I think you might be slightly concerned. He might be whipped off penalties, but he'll have competition in his own team from the likes of Griezmann as well. But there's all the big names in there. You've got the likes of Robin Lewandowski, if you think he can possibly make a bit of a run towards the quarters, he's a 25 to 1 shot. But I do think people are factoring in the groups in a big way. And I think that's why Lukaku and Kane really are both up there ahead of the likes of Mbappe and Ronaldo. If I had to have a bet, I'd be leaning towards Ronaldo. I must say, I think his class will out. You know, he's going to get plenty of set plays, penalties and that sort of thing. And I know it's a tough group, but what I would say, I think, Dan, is with the best three, with the third place option of getting through as well, I'd be staggered if Portugal aren't at least getting another game. So they should get the 4. Yeah.
What about the Golden Ball? Is that a popular thing for people to bet on?
I think it's become a bit more interesting. It's really hard, isn't it, to try and pick out a player of the tournament way in advance of the actual tournament starting. But we need to give a nod really to N'Golo Kante. His performances for Chelsea in big games have been outstanding, haven't they? And he's definitely a popular pick. I think he's now around 20 to 1 with ourselves, having been a bigger price. It will be a market that will try and keep open throughout the tournament. Obviously, it will chop and change as things go along, but I think it's tough to have a stab. The only thing I think from memory, and I'm sure you guys, the experts, will be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, it does tend, because the Golden Boot exists, it tends to lean more towards a midfielder or a defender. Mbappe's up there at 10 to 1 favourite, just having a look now. Kevin De Bruyne, obviously, we're not sure on his injury status. He's 14 to 1. I'd want a player that will play through the tournament, and I've got a sneaky feeling Portugal might go quite far, and I quite like Diaz at a price at 33s, but all the usual suspects are in there. A couple of the traders were sweet on Paul Pogba and wanted to give him a mention, think he'll actually turn up in consistent form for France, which is what United fans would love to see a bit more of. But yeah, all the usuals are there. And we do have, I'll just give a very quick mention, we've got the young player of the tournament as well. At the moment, it's a one-horse race, it seems, with Phil Foden in at 3 to 1. Plenty of English players in there, the likes of Mason Mount, 6-1 as well. But Phil Foden, I think the name on everyone's lips, and it's been a bit of a one-horse race there. But again, it's another market people are starting to get stuck into.
Thanks ever so much for joining me, Sam. It's been great to talk to you and go through the runners and riders. And yeah, we'll hear from you again soon on this podcast.
Yeah, as ever, we'd encourage everyone to gamble responsibly and really enjoy the tournament for what it is. All the latest markets can be found over at betvictor.com.
Right, so we've covered England there, probably in too much detail now, because now I've got the jitters going into the tournament. So let's look how they fare compared to the rest of the competition in Euro 2020 when it comes to the pre-tournament favourites that we've just heard about from Sam. Martin, you've compiled some WhoScored 11s for us, haven't you? The highest rated 11s across the season for various countries. So talk us through that and tell us the top 5.
Yeah, so we did this based on, again, Jonathan won't like this, but based on league ratings from the previous season.
Relevant.
Just to give an idea of who's got the strongest starting 11, and there's some interesting rankings basically. I'll start. Number 1 is England, our top, based on that the 11 that I discussed previously. They do have the highest average rating in our system. Number 2 is actually Germany. Who, as individuals on paper, very, very strong 11, but I agree with Jonathan. I worry about them. Well, I don't worry because I'm not bothered if they struggle, but I would worry if I was a Germany fan. Number 3 is Portugal, which I think, if you look at their starting 11, I think they're a real contender, and I think with Fernando Santos, they've got a manager who likes boring football like Jonathan. So they're a great bet this summer, I think. Number 4, again, another good price in the market, I think, is Italy. So you'll notice that I haven't even mentioned France yet, who are 5th. And then it goes Spain, Belgium, Netherlands, completing the sort of top 8 of the favourites. So let me try and justify that France ranking very quickly. Basically, what I would say about France and their team on paper is exceptional. And if you look at the talents in there, then you would say, yeah, they've got the best shot at it, in my opinion. But there are players there, like I mentioned, Varane earlier, struggled this season. People would look at them and be like, he's one of the best at the tournament. Not based on form, he isn't. Even players like, they've got players, I think crucially, they've got players who have ended the season well, and that will sort of offset what this ranking suggests. Because if you look at the likes of Pogba and Kante, both obviously ended the season very well. Bit hit and miss at the start. Kante under Lampard and Pogba obviously wasn't starting a lot at the start of the season. So yeah, there's players who've been affected in their sort of season rating by that. If you're doing it coming into the tournament, then they do look very, very strong. But yeah, even someone like Griezmann, excellent for France in general, was brilliant at the World Cup, but sort of he's had a better season for Barcelona, but he's still not sort of reached the heights that you would want from him. Someone like Rabiot, who will start for France, has had a bit of an indifferent season for an indifferent Juventus. So from an individual standpoint, they don't come into it incredibly, but most of them have ended the season well. And if you look at the squad depth, I think that's the key, because squad depth will be so important. And I think that's why England and France are sort of set out as the favourites at this point. I do agree that those two have the strongest squads. So yeah, feel free to pick at that as you will. I guess we'll chat about the favourites, the sort of contenders, and see what we fancy, really.
Yeah, Jonathan, talk me through that nonsense.
I mean, as I think I've made clear, I'm not sure how relevant league form is, how directly relevant league form is to how well people play for the national team. Yeah, but I mean, there are hundreds of examples over time of players who played exceptionally well for the national team, couldn't get in the club side. I don't know, David Healy. Yeah. I mean, did David Healy score more goals in Northern Ireland than he scored in the league? There's some.
I'd imagine so. I'd imagine so.
So, you know, it's. If I'm a France fan, that's not worrying me that much.
No, their squad's a joke. Their squad is a joke, I think. And also, if this was England and people coming into bad form, you tend to worry about it a little bit. But if a German player's out of form, for example, or a France player's out of form, you just know they'll turn up on the big stage and be good. That's how it feels anyway.
But put meat on those bones. Look at Miroslav Klose. He scored hundreds of goals for Germany every tournament he played in.
Yeah.
Club career is pretty average by comparison. And he wouldn't be in form in club football, and then he'd come out the tournament with 5 more goals to his name, and because Germany had a role for him and he was comfortable in that setup. It's just obviously you want your players in good form going into the tournament, but there are so many other things going on. And Germany sort of is the reverse. We've got huge worries not about the squad. We know the squad's really good. The problem is the manager, who seems to have lost it. And it doesn't matter how good your form is if you have no faith in your manager, and your manager's, if your manager was in the tactical vanguard 15 years ago and hasn't quite moved on, which I think is the case with Löw, or is struggling to adapt as he tries to move on, you're still going to be vulnerable no matter what your form is going into it. So, or you're something like Griezmann, obviously had a terrible season for Barcelona, but if you're the France manager, are you still comfortable picking him? Yeah, because he won the World Cup 3 years ago.
Yeah. So are we saying
the other night?
I assume that we are, but are we saying that France's starting 11, everyone fit, France's starting 11, comfortably the best of the tournament, or
yeah,
I think so.
Even their second 11 will be comfortably the best in the tournament.
Their under 21s isn't bad either. Their under 21 side is ridiculous.
They're not bad on paper, but they are quite bad.
True. Personnel-wise, you look at it and you think that's a frightening third 11. France have got incredible depth. Italy, Martin, they're an interesting one from that. People might be surprised to see them in the top 5.
I think they look really strong, and they're coming into it having made great strides under Roberto Mancini. So I think they're a good sort of outside bet, not necessarily a dark horse, but they're sort of one of the longer price favourites. I think they've got a really nice balance in midfield. My concern with Italy is the striker, Ciro Immobile, very good record, club level, never really does it for international, and even Belotti, his sort of backup. I do like Insigne's come off his best season, and Chiesa on the other flank. That's really, really dangerous. I like that a lot. But I'd have question marks over their defence, just aging, very aging, and where they've been aging for forever, it seems, but they haven't had strong seasons, Bonucci and Chiellini, for Juventus. So I wouldn't start them personally, but they definitely will start. But even at fullback, they're not incredibly strong. So that probably holds them back. But in terms of midfield and their wingers, I think they look great.
Yeah, got a midfield that looks after the ball, the likes of Verratti and Jorginho, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern, I know that, they were unbeaten in qualifying, but qualifying does feel quite a long time ago now.
Yeah.
And the other, that's one of those stats where it's a little bit double-edged, because you look at it and they didn't actually beat anybody who you wouldn't expect them to beat. So had they really been tested under Mancini? I sort of gut feel, the eye test, yes, they're playing much better. How meaningful are those statistics? I think there's still a slight question mark there.
Cool.
I think Portugal are the one that I would look out for. I think in terms of, obviously they won the last Euros. This squad is levels above that squad. Incredible like if you look at Diaz and Fernandes just on their own coming into the squad, the fullbacks are obviously Guerrero played that tournament from what I recall, but then you've got Cancelo who's had an amazing season. Dan looks very confused by whatever I'm saying, but yeah.
Sorry, I had a phone call come through my headphones from my laptop.
But yeah, no, their squad. If you look at the players again, there'll be another team that have to leave out some.
João Felix isn't going to get in the team, is it? There's no way João Felix, because I mean, actually, their problem is Ronaldo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Ronaldo shouldn't play, but he will play. I think there's a really good case for playing Andre Silva, not Ronaldo.
Yeah. So Andre Silva and João Felix won't play. Diogo Jota might not even start. He probably will, but he might not. There's a chance that he doesn't start. They've got Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, incredible attacking options. I'd worry about them in central midfield. That's the issue for Portugal. I think you're looking at sort of Neves and Moutinho and Danilo Pereira. Danilo Pereira is a strong player, but two of those three will probably play. So not that great.
Okay, well, this wouldn't be a preview show without throwing in some dodgy predictions. So the three of us are going to chance our arms. And as I say, we're proudly sponsored by BetVictor for this series, and they are going to offer exclusive price boosts based on our tips. Silly. BetVictor. There is a link in the description below that can be found to get them. And Martin, you've got a juicy one to start off with. Now, this is good. This is very good. Yeah,
I don't know what we'll come to sort of winner, golden boot sort of categories later. but there's a popular market, and it's obviously the outright winner Golden Boot sort of double. And for me, my two picks for that are France and Romelu Lukaku. Lukaku, just because he's got a very favourable group. I think they can rack up hatfuls against Russia, Finland. So yeah, it's all about the group, isn't it? Usually when it comes to those sort of things, depending on if Eden Hazard is fit, he may well take penalties as well. His record at international level is insane. It's I think he scored in 13 of his last 16 internationals, so comes into it in great form off the back of a great season. The slight issue there you would look at is whether De Bruyne is fit. I think he will probably play with a mask, if not for the first game, then from that point onwards. So the supply that he gets is superb. So I think France to win and Lukaku top scorer has been boosted from 50 to 1, which is already a massive price.
Yeah, it's crazy.
To 55 to 1 by BetVictor. And we'll have a landing page where you can find those odds, and we'll put that in the description of this video and out on socials and stuff. But that price is ridiculous. If you look at the favourite in that particular market is England to win and Kane top scorer. That's 16 to 1. And this is 55 to 1 on France and Lukaku. And one thing I would say, people might think, oh, it's probably going to be someone who wins the tournament. It's probably going to be a France player. Firstly, France have got a very difficult group. Secondly, they've got options up front where they'll spread the goals around, less the case at Belgium. And yeah, in terms of, I've messed that bit up. Sorry, I'll start again. What was I going to say? Yeah. And thirdly, yes, basically, if you look at the previous 6 Euros, the top scorer didn't actually come from the winner of the tournament. It actually only happened in one of the last 6, I should say, and that was David Villa for Spain in 2008. So it's not really hugely important if they win the tournament or not. So I think France to win the tournament, Lukaku top scorer at that price is crazy money, really. Obviously, please gamble responsibly, but I think that's just a massive price.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really strong bet. That's something I'll certainly be looking at. And Jonathan, I mean, Benzema might not play, but he was 16 to 1 the last time I checked to win the Golden Boot with BetVictor. Will Benzema play, or will he go with his tried and trusted of Giroud?
I think he will play, because I don't really see why you'd bring him into the squad. Given the potential disruption he causes, if you're not thinking of playing him, to bring him in the squad would seem odd. And I guess, unfortunately for Giroud, he hasn't been a regular for Chelsea in recent weeks. So
no,
hasn't been a regular starter anyway. So I think he will start. And 16 to 1. I mean, that sounds decent to me. I take the point that obviously France will spread him around, and Mbappe, I would assume, would score significant numbers of the goals that France do score. But there's got to be a chance that 4 or 5 goals is enough. And France could beat Hungary 4 or 5-0 and Benzema hat-trick, and he's more than halfway there.
Yeah, a bit like Kane, Panama in the World Cup in 2018. Yeah, we're going to move on now to our magazine pull-out section, as I've labelled it now, where we're going to go through each group and just basically talk about the teams and talk about the group in general. So we'll start, obviously, with Group A: Italy, Turkey, Switzerland and Wales. Jonathan, your thoughts on that group?
I think... Well, we talked a little bit about Italy, haven't we? So I think they will top that group. I think home advantage, especially now that at least some fans will be in grounds, I think is fairly significant. But I think Turkey are really interesting. We mentioned the centre back pairing of Soyuncu and Demirel, and I think the fact that they're almost sort of an old school centre back pairing. They're good in the air rather than necessarily being brilliant footballing defenders, which probably counts against Wales, or certainly counts against Kiefer Moore starting for Wales. That there's not much point playing a 6'5", non-Premier League striker against 2 players coming from the air as that, or indeed Bonucci and Chiellini when they play Italy. So I think that does present a problem for Wales. I think Turkey, I think Senor Güneş is a. I'm not saying he's a better coach than Fatih Terim, but he's a much more interesting coach than Fatih Terim. You sort of get a sense in Turkish football that there's a sort of the dichotomy between the two. There's Fatih Terim's old school. It's almost that sort of German football of the 90s. It's all about leadership and all about character. I think Güneş is a much more modern, much more front foot coach. I think it's a really exciting young side, apart from, of course, Buck Yilmaz, who turns 36 within a week, I think 4 days after the final. And he's had a brilliant season for Lille. So they've got goal scoring. They've got two really good centre backs. They've got a whole load of creative midfielders. I think Turkey could be really exciting. I ummed and ahed, when we were looking at our sort of tips for the tournament about Turkey to get to the quarterfinal. When I mapped it out, I had them playing Denmark in the last 16. I think Denmark. I think that's going to be a clash of two decent dark horses, and I sort of suspect Denmark might win that. But in the group, I think Turkey could be really good to watch. Wales. They'll sit deep. They'll play in the break. We've seen how they play. They've got the memories of 4 years ago. The absence of Ryan Giggs from the bench, I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but it's obviously not ideal. And Switzerland, I suspect they'll go to a back three, which is a change for them. With now they haven't got Lichtsteiner, and then Ricardo Rodriguez will tuck in on the left side. I think they look solid. My concern for them is just a lack of goals. That Seferovic and Berlin-Bolo, although you'd think they should be good players in the break, as they both have that sort of explosive pace, their goals return is just poor. So I suspect Italy top, Turkey second, and then a scrap between Wales and Switzerland for third.
Yeah, no Buffon at a tournament for the first time since Euro 2000 as well, which is an absolute disgrace. As long as he's still playing football as a goalkeeper, you find room for him in the top three goalkeepers in the squad. In my opinion, he should be there. That's going to be really weird not seeing him in goal for Italy. Group B, Martin, you've got Belgium, Denmark, Finland, and Russia. Do you want to talk us through the runners and riders in that group?
Yeah, I think you look at Belgium as the sort of outright favourites, but I do agree there's a lot of interest in Denmark. I think a lot of people are sort of backing Denmark as a dark horse this year. But I agree with Jonathan. I think Turkey will finish second in that group and Denmark in this group, which means they'll play each other in the round of 16. And personally, I think that's got extra time and penalties written all over it, that game. So either one of those two could get to the quarterfinals quite easily. I do think it'll be a Belgium Denmark 1-2, and then I actually think it's quite close for third and fourth. So I think people might underestimate Finland a little bit. They'll try and be this season's Iceland, won't they? I don't think they've got a chance of that, but I think they're a better team than people give them credit for. Tamim Pukki's an excellent finisher, but the big issue is there's concerns over his fitness heading into the tournament. He's got an ankle injury at the moment, so everything rides on him. If he's fit, they're not this super defensive team. Actually, they lost a friendly 2-0, I think, to Sweden a couple of days ago, but before that they'd scored in 10 games in a row. For a team like Finland, it's good going, and they've beaten France in that run as well. So I think my sort of bet, or what my sort of selection for that group would maybe for Finland to beat Russia and to finish third, but I could see that ending in a draw as well. Personally, I think that both of those will go out, and there won't be a third place team from that group. Personally,
do you want to have a look at Group C, Jonathan? Austria, Netherlands, North Macedonia, and Ukraine. Am I right in thinking Netherlands weren't at the last World
Yeah,
Cup?
they haven't been at the tournament. Haven't been at a major tournament since 2014. So, in some ways, I think this is not just in some ways. This is the weakest group in the tournament. I think by some margin.
Yeah.
The Dutch and North Macedonia weren't there 5 years ago. Sorry, and Ukraine and Austria both finished bottom of their group. Just in terms of recent Euro record, it's pretty weak. I think the Dutch are terrible. I think they're so much less than some of their parts, and those parts aren't quite what they might be. I mean, the breakup of that Ajax team seems to have made every single player in it worse. So, Frenkie de Jong, De Ligt, Van der Beek have all got worse since leaving that system. I guess you look at De Vrij and De Ligt at the back and you say, okay, that's a solid enough base. But I think all the gains they made under Koeman have been handed back under Frank de Boer. Very reliant on Memphis Depay for goals. I think it's very hard for them to play the sort of possession football they want to play under de Boer with Depay, who you would naturally want to play on the break. So I think they'll go through just because the rest of the group isn't that good. But I think there's a significant possibility Ukraine could take top spot from them. they also like that. Ideally, they play that 4-3-3 shape. I've always liked Stepanenko at the back of midfield. He's been my young one to watch for about 15 years now, and he's 32. I think we've got to accept he's not actually going to be quite as good as I thought he was when I first saw him, but he's still a very good player. But I think that midfield generally is the balance of units really nice. You have Zinchenko plays in midfield for them, not quite as a number 10, but in a much more sort of creative role than he occupies at City. And then you have Malinovsky from Atalanta sort of as the shuttler alongside. So I think the balance of that midfield three is really good. Do they have a goal scorer is the problem. Very reliant on Yaremchuk, who got 23 goals for Ghent last season, but is young, is inexperienced. I think he's only got less than 10 caps. But there's clearly potential there. They were unbeaten in qualifying, and I think the other thing with them is, and this is it's very hard to say this without sounding trite and as if you're diminishing something that's obviously massively serious. But the fact they are at war, it gives them something to play for that is not just football. And we've seen that in major tournaments throughout time, that countries that have an additional reason for patriotism often do perform slightly better. I remember talking to Slaven Bilic about playing for Croatia in Euro 96. The first tournament Croatia had played ever. But I mean, post the breakup of Yugoslavia, and him sort of saying that he looks back at pictures of himself belting out the Croatian national anthem and saying he's sort of slightly terrified by the ferocity on his own face because they felt it so much. It's a different situation for Ukraine, obviously, but I think the desire to sort of remind people Ukraine exists and is not just a sort of frontier state, I think, is strong there. The other two sides in the group, I mean, North Macedonia, obviously, they did win away in Germany in March, so they can't be entirely discounted. Although Nestorovsky being out is a big loss. They're the main forward. Bardi's free kicks, I think, a potential source of joy for them. And Austria, it wasn't anywhere near the first choice Austria we saw in Middlesbrough against England, but I think we saw they are fairly limited. They are aggressive, well organised. Alaba obviously is the outstanding player there, as a sort of ball-playing centre-back as he plays for Austria. But Sabitz is, I think we've seen for Leipzig, is a very, very good midfielder. And they do have a 6'7" centre-forward in Kalajdzic from Salzburg. So there are options there, but I'd quite fancy Ukraine to top that group, then the Dutch, then Austria, then North Macedonia. I
mean, considering you said it was a boring group, you covered a lot
of
ground there. Made it interesting.
I said it was a weak group. I didn't say it was a boring
group. Sorry, I misquoted you, Jonathan. I do apologise. Move on to Group D then now, Martin. Croatia, Czech Republic, England, Scotland. Just talk to us about Scotland.
They could get second. I don't think it's beyond them. I don't think Croatia are that far above Scotland or Czech Republic. I think they've regressed. If you look at their squad since the World Cup, they've probably only improved in one position, and that might be Borna Barisic at left back, which isn't a significant improvement. We've got players there that are well into their 30s now, the sort of stalwarts of the team. Mandzukic is gone, Rakitic is gone, Modric is mid-30s now, Perisic is early to mid-30s and not playing regularly for Inter, so he's past his peak. So I don't think Croatia are a shoe into second at all, and Scotland have beaten Czech Republic twice this season. And there's strengths in that team. They've got a very good midfield. Scott McTominay often plays at centre-back. They've got that's sort of the depth that they have in midfield. John McGinn bangs in the goals for Scotland. Wish he'd do that more for Villa, but Shea Adams is a boost for them in terms of declaring his allegiance for Scotland. A very decent striker, if not prolific. So yeah, they've got a very decent chance of escaping the group, in my opinion, and not necessarily beneath Croatia, I don't think.
Yeah, one of the best players on the planet at the moment in John McGinn, playing as a number 10 for Scotland at the moment. Jonathan, we'll come to you for Group E, Poland, Slovakia, Spain and Sweden. What are Spain's realistic expectations for this tournament?
Oh, I think they could win it. I mean, I don't think they're favourites, but they've got to be in that next clutch below France. They obviously had that very disrupted World Cup with Lopetegui being sacked on the eve of the tournament. So, their World Cup, I don't think you can really read anything into because there's so much nonsense going on. Luis Enrique coming in and then getting ill and leaving, and Moreno taking over, and then Luis Enrique coming back for him, and Moreno, all that sort of difficulty of what Moreno's new role was going to be and what he'd been promised. But I think the last sort of year or so, Luis Enrique's been able to put his stamp on this, and he's sort of done with Spain. I think what he did with Barcelona. It's the 4-3-3, but it's a lot more direct than Spain were a decade ago, and I think certainly more watchable for it. I'm not sure if better for it. And I like the fact he's only picked 24 players, not 26. I think that says a coach who knows his own mind, and to have the balls to leave out every single Real Madrid player. Well, if you're that self-confident, that ruthless, I admire that, rather than taking Sergio Ramos just because he happens to be within 4 caps of the record. And I think that's it's a good sign of a coach who knows his own mind.
Yeah,
I think they do have strength in depth even within that 24. Emerick Laporte declaring for them, I think is a huge thing because they were a little bit short at centre back. It could be him and Garcia as the two. It's a Manchester City pairing at centre back. I guess there's an issue in goal. You played De Gea, who was had a terrible World Cup. Really, I think that's where De Gea's problems began. Was his loss of confidence there. That I think he doesn't like playing behind a high line, and so maybe you then bring in Unai Simon. But we saw in that 6-0 win over Germany, when they get in the rhythm, they are really, really good, and they have that. That very typical Spanish fluency up front, and the fact Ferran Torres can score hat-tricks coming in from wide is incredibly useful in that kind of system, and hard to defend against for national teams where I think the structure is a bit more basic. So I think there's no reason why they can't be semi-finalists, finalists, and if France slip up, they'd be one of the 2 or 3 sides who could take advantage. I don't think this is that tough a group for them either. No. I think the battle for second is interesting, but I think Spain should win the group pretty easily. Sweden, I quite enjoyed Sweden at the World Cup. I liked them without Zlatan. I think Zlatan had become problematic for them, and so when he came back, I thought that was bad news. The fact he's gone again is probably good news. They're just very Swedish. They're very solid. There's not a huge amount of individual quality there, but the unit works. And you've got the pace of Isak, who can get in behind teams. You've got Kulusevski, who, not consistently, but we've seen for Juventus that on form he can be a very, very effective player. So they do have possibilities. They have options there. Poland, I think, are actually genuinely interesting. I can't work them out because they clearly have huge quality with Lewandowski and Milik. Paulo Sousa, who's a coach who. I don't know. I sort of, when he was at Basel, I sort of thought he was on the brink of something huge, and it never quite worked for him. He likes the back 3. I think there's a lot of internal resistance within Poland to that they sort of feel that Polish football has never been successful with the back 3, and they don't think it ever can be successful with the back 3. But that's his system. I think the advantage of the system with the players they've got is it allows Zielinski to play almost as an old-fashioned number 10, whilst having a base of the 3 centre-backs and 2 slightly more defensive midfielders behind him. And I think Rebus looks really good as that sort of overlapping left wing-back. So, Poland always fall flat in major tournaments, but this looks a nicely balanced side, albeit there's a lot of scepticism about it in Poland. Slovakia, it's all about Hamšík and probably his final tournament. He's come back from China to Sweden to get fit for it. So I think that shows his commitment. They obviously that slightly strange thing where they changed coach after the playoff, and Tarkovic came in for Hapal after they'd beaten Northern Ireland and Ireland in the playoffs. So I don't know. I find Slovakia very hard to find interesting. I've watched them a lot of World Cups, and they're habitually really tedious. I'd love them to surprise me, but I feel it's all about Hamšík. So I think I'd go Spain, Poland, Sweden, Slovakia, but Sweden, Poland could easily be the other way around.
Lovely stuff. And Martin, Group F for you. We've kind of covered France, Germany and Portugal. What's your Hungary knowledge like?
It's okay. Obviously, the big issue is Dominik Szoboszlai is never likely to be fit because he hasn't played for Leipzig since he signed in January. But he's officially been ruled out. He was in the provisional squad, which is a bit of a surprise in itself. But yeah, he's not made the cut, and he's the quality in that team. He's the star quality and a player that a lot of people would have been excited to watch. So that's a monumental blow, really, just because up front now that you're looking at Adam Salai, who's 33, 34, doesn't play regularly. Roland Salai, who also plays in the Bundesliga, who's passable but not exciting. Where they're strongest is at the back. Peter Gulaschi and Willi Orban, obviously both strong players for RB Leipzig. We've got another centre-back called Attila Salai, who plays for Fenerbahce, I believe. He's a good young centre-back. So they're decent defensively. I think they could frustrate a couple of teams, but it's very, very hard to see them getting a point in the group, to be fair. I just don't think there's goals. There's markets for the sort of lowest scorers in the tournament, and they'll be one of the favourites for sure, because there's a few teams in this tournament who you could see going out without scoring, and they're certainly one of them. I don't think they're as bad as people will expect, and as bad as maybe I have suggested there. But I just think that loss of Szoboszlai is massive. So yeah, it's what was a really, really difficult task has basically become impossible for them to sort of even scrape third. I think the interesting thing in that group is the order of the rest, isn't it, really? And obviously you look at Germany, who something we haven't touched on, they've got home advantage playing in Munich, so that might come into it. But I don't think France will be that disappointed by not having home advantage, because they're not actually that strong in France, not been that strong in France recently. So I don't think that's too much of an issue. So I personally think it will be France, Portugal, Germany, 1, 2, 3.
If Hungary had home advantage for that final game when they played Germany, that could have been different. Especially if Germany had a wobbly start, if that was sort of two teams on no points, winner takes all for third place and a passage through, I think that could have been really exciting. But the fact that game is in Munich and not in Budapest,
I think Budapest that's the only stadium where they're looking at full capacity, isn't it? I think certainly early on, I think they're looking at 100% capacity there. So that could play in their favour, and certainly is a boost that they very much need. But yes, it's so difficult. You just can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a political decision as much as a health-based one, because they've redone the old Mepstadion as the Ferenc Puskás Arena. It's a beautiful new stadium, but the whole thing was about the Euros, and Viktor Orban he's very aware of the power of football from a soft power point of view, and he's very aware of the Hungary team of the 50s, and he's very aware that football can help promote a nation. I think the frustration in Hungary is it's gone beyond the point where they're sort of going, well, why aren't we as good as we were in the 50s? Because it just seems an impossible gulf now. But the question to become, how come we haven't even had one good player? We look at Slovakia, and obviously huge links between Hungary and Slovakia, and they've had Marek Hamšík. They look at Croatia, and similarly huge historical links, and Croatia have had Modric and half a dozen, 2 dozen really good players in the last 20 years. We look even at Slovenia, who we've always sort of slightly patronised as the little neighbour, with a quarter of the population, something like that, and they look at Jan Oblak or Zachovic in 2000 and 2002, I guess now. And you think, well, why haven't we produced a player like that? But Szoboszlai, I think, that is him. And I think, there's a lot of money being invested in Hungary at the minute. I think we will see them become a bit stronger in the next decade or so. But this is meant to be the launch pad. I think that's why they're desperate to get a full stadium.
Let's finish then with the panelist picks. We're all going to go through and make our predictions for the tournament very quickly. So first off, winner of the tournament. I think we'll probably be the same here, possibly.
France.
Yep, me too.
Agreed.
Yeah.
France.
All France. Player of the tournament.
Kante.
Kante, good shout.
I think I had De Bruyne until he got smashed in the face in the Champions League final.
He was mine.
Yeah, I've switched to Kante actually just since that final. I just think it's one of those where narrative comes into it a little bit. Obviously, he's an exceptional player, but he's hugely lovable as well. I can just see that photo up with his little smile and the trophy, and everyone wants that, don't they? Interestingly, sort of in comparison to the Golden Ball one, where it's not that important winning the tournament and winning the Golden Ball, all of the last 6 winners of the tournament have had the Golden Ball winner, rather than the Golden Boot. So each of the last 6 players of the tournament come from the winner in the Euros, which is interestingly not entirely relevant, but that's the opposite at the World Cup. None of the last 6 winners have had the winner of the Golden Ball. So just a little tidbit for you there.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, Martin. Let's talk about Golden Boot then, Jonathan.
Oh, did I say Mbappe? I can't remember.
I believe that you did, yes. I think so.
Yeah, because he's really good, and I think France will win the tournament. I think, there is the danger France spread the goals around, but I certainly if it plays at the World Cup, there is, it's a lopsided. The 43-1 is lopsided. That Matuidi played in that tucked-in role at the World Cup. I think Adrian Rabiot will probably play there. I guess he may not, but everything's skewed to people getting out of the way for Mbappe to make those runs. So as soon as a team has to come out against France, they can hit him like that. And that game against Argentina at the World Cup, he was absolutely terrifying that day. I just one of those rare occasions. I don't know how many games of football I've been to in my life, but there's only been half a dozen where I've sort of looked at it playing. God, I don't know what you do. I don't know how you defend against that, and that was one of them. So, for that capacity, when France take an early lead and teams come at them, I think Mbappe will rip them apart. And I think he has become a better finisher in the last 3 years. So, he got the 3 goals at the World Cup. So I can see him getting more than that here.
I've gone Lukaku, so time to shout out that bet again. The France and Lukaku double 55-1 on BetVictor at the moment. Go and check that out because I think they're incredible odds. Martin, who was your top scorer?
Yeah, exact same. That's why I went for that tip. Yeah, Lukaku. I just think the goals in the group stages, like I mentioned earlier. So that's an exclusive boost to WhoScored. So yeah, just follow the link in the description to this video and get on that. Gamble responsibly, but great price. So yeah, that's for me.
Dark horse, Jonathan.
Denmark.
Denmark.
Yeah, I think the draw has been relatively kind to them. I think we saw the games against England in the Nations League. We saw how solid they are while still posing a threat. I think Olga Hryder leaving and Hjulsand coming in has made them a much more proactive, livelier team. So I can see them getting to the quarterfinal without really having to beat anybody that strenuous. And once you're in the quarterfinal, anything can happen. So I don't really know what dark horse means, to be honest.
Yeah, I was confused.
Does dark horse mean a team, an unfantasy team you think can win it, or does it mean a team you think will go deeper than people expect? I don't think Denmark will win it, but if it's deeper than you expect, then Denmark.
Yeah, I think what you've just said, but I've picked Italy.
Well, that would be the other interpretation of it.
Yeah, I went Italy. I didn't know who else to pick, to be honest. I like the look of that Italy side, and I don't really hear them being talked about much. So they're my dark horse to win it.
And they're about 12-1 to win, something like that.
Somewhere around that. I think they're the 6th favourite, which I'd agree is longer than it should be. So
yeah. What's your interpretation, Martin?
I went for Ukraine. Just on the fact that I agree with Jonathan that I think they'll finish above Netherlands in the group, which is will be seen as a shock in itself. They've got a pretty tough draw from that point onwards. I sort of take that into account. But I don't really think, having posed the question, I don't really see a team that's like a Denmark or a Turkey that can get to the quarterfinals. But is that more than you'd expect? They'd have to go that step far for that to be more than you'd expect, I'd say. And I don't really see that. So, yeah, I just went for Ukraine just on the basis that I think they'll top the group, and who knows from that point. And
Jonathan, your interpretation of the underachiever?
Oh, the Dutch. I think. I mean, maybe Frank de Boer will prove me wrong, but the evidence that 2-2 draw against Scotland makes me pretty confident that the Dutch will significantly underperform.
Martin?
Yeah, agree. He changed system in that game as well. He went to back 3, I think. It's just like he's ripping things up like days before the tournament. And he's changed everything really tactically from what Koeman had done and had success with. I don't see any value in them at all I think they're 14-1. That's a terrible price. I think they'll struggle. So yeah, the Dutch can't look beyond them.
Famous last words from me. I picked Germany, so they're probably going to go on and win the whole thing now that I've picked them as the underachiever, because it's the Germans, isn't it? That's what they do.
Well, and bringing Hummels back actually means they have a centre back.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing. I didn't understand why Löw did that after the World Cup. I just think an international manager announcing these three players, so the Hummels, Müller, and Boateng, that I'm not going to pick them again. Which is, why would you do it? Leave them out of the squad. That's fine, but don't shut the door on them. It's like McLaren did the same with David Beckham. Just
stupid.
You don't need. You don't need to make these sort of blood sacrifices. They
were like 28 at the time as well, weren't they? I checked. I was looking at their ages, having been brought back in. I think Hummels is 31 and Muller's 30. Why are you writing them off?
I mean, Muller's never scored a goal in the Euros, has he? I think he's got the biggest discrepancy between goals in the World Cup and the Euros for a European player, obviously. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you said about Luis Enrique earlier being a sign of strength in the way he's picked his squad. I would say that's a sign of weakness.
Yeah,
saying you're not going to pick these players and bring them back. It's mad, isn't it? It doesn't make any sense at all.
I think it's a bit sort of not selfish. I don't know what the word is. He knows he's going out, so he's just gone back on his decision, and now he's deciding to pick the best players. He realises this is his last tournament. He needs to really give it a go, and I completely agree. It's weak.
Right, well, that does us, I think, for this bumper Euro 2020 preview on Edge of the Box on WhoScored in association with Bet Victor. Thanks very much to the guys for joining me, and thanks for everyone who's tuned in as well. Make sure you are following and subscribing with your post notifications on, and you'll know when the next edition of the show is out. Hope everyone's as excited about the Euros as we are, and that this has been of some use to you. Have a great weekend.